good afternoon to you, sir. So, okay. Uh, I'll start by introducing sir. So, almost everyone in the field of biology has come across the book titled The Molecular Biology of the Cell. And today we are honored to have one of the original authors behind that book, Dr. Bruce Alberts. So, he was awarded the National Medal of Science by the President of the United States in 2014. And in 2016, he was also awarded the prestigious Lasker Coastland Special Achievement Award in Medical Science. Dr. Alberts also served as the editor-in-chief of Science magazine, uh, and as was also one of the first three United States science envoys. He, at the moment, is the Chancellor's Leadership Chair in Biochemistry and Biophysics for Science and Education at the University of California, San Francisco. And before this, he also served as the President of the National Academy of Sciences for 2 terms for 6 years each. He has also been the recipient of many honors and awards. There's a long list of it, and it includes 16 honorary degrees. And at the moment, he's also serving as the advisory board on the advisory boards of more than 25 non-profit institutions. So we are very grateful to have you here, sir. And so I'll directly start with the questions that we have. And to the audience, please, you can go to the chat and see a set of instructions that have been posted. I'll also briefly tell you that after every 2 or so questions that we ask, we'll have a question for the audience itself. So you guys can either unmute or type it in the chat box, whatever question you have, and we'll try to include that. So the first question that we have is, having been in science for such a long time, how would you describe your own journey? I mean, the questions that you had that made you interested in science, and the mentors that guided you, and the obstacles that you faced. So how would you go on to describe about that?
Why did I become a scientist? Is that what you want to know?
Yeah, kind of the whole journey itself. It's a long journey. And so.
Yeah, well, I became a scientist because I was a pre-medical student in college, and I couldn't stand the laboratories we had. And I was in the laboratory every afternoon for chemistry or physics or biology. And those laboratories in the afternoon were like cooking. You follow instructions, and it wasn't anything to do with science. And after 2 years of that, I had a particularly bad laboratory, even worse, in a course called physical chemistry. And after 1 semester of that lab, I said, I can't stand this lab anymore. I like the course, but the lab has nothing to do with the course. How can I get out of taking the lab? And they told me, this is at Harvard University, I could work in a research lab, and that would substitute. And that made all the difference. As soon as I got in a research lab, I realized I really liked science. I discovered what science was. And I decided I wouldn't be a medical student. I would go to get a PhD. So I now believe that every student should get in a lab the first year of college and spend a little time in a laboratory. Not much time, because you have other things to do, but you need to be exposed to real science, not cooking. Cooking as science is what I call it. And we still do a lot of cooking in college science in the United States. Maybe India is better. And your university is certainly special. I've been there. And is it still a good university? Is it still, you like it?
Yeah, at the moment.
You all get in laboratories?
Yeah, I mean, the bunch of us a few of us are in the PhD program itself, and yeah, master students also get the experience to be in the lab. So yeah.
Yeah, well, that's good. Well, so then, science is something you learn by being an apprentice trying to do science. And the other thing I would say is that you make a lot of mistakes. Everybody makes a lot of mistakes, and we all learn from our mistakes. And every time I had many graduate students work in my lab after I became a scientist, and they had to make their own mistakes. You can't treat it like cooking. You can't tell a student what to do all the time because they'll never really learn how to be a scientist. But you have to guide them enough so that they can do things that are likely to work or likely to be meaningful. But my observation about creating a scientist from all my different graduate students is that they never really became a scientist until they had done something, make something work that they had thought of themselves. In other words, you have until they had an idea that I didn't have and they made it work, then they became a scientist. They gained the self-confidence in that they could be a scientist on their own. But you can't make people scientists by having them follow instructions and do cooking because science is not something that you do by a form. Science is like art, okay? I often talk about the facts that I'm a terrible artist and I could have every piece of equipment and all the paints that Rembrandt had, a famous painter, and I would only make a mess, nothing. So a good scientist is just like being Rembrandt as a painter. The good scientists learn how to make a clever strategy that is different from what other people are doing and can make a difference. And my feeling is, science is a wonderful life if you could become a scientist, because you could get paid for solving problems that are important and that interest you. When I was your age, actually, I didn't think you could get paid to be a scientist. I thought, I knew about Albert Einstein. He had worked in a patent office, but I never met a scientist. And till I actually got into a laboratory, I realized that people could get paid for doing this. So it's a great privilege to be a scientist because you get to work on solving problems. It's like, you're painting pictures like Rembrandt, and they're paying you to do it. And you have to learn how to do it well. And that means learn how to design a strategy that's not the same as what everybody else is doing. Too many young scientists feel forced to just do the same thing that they did in their training. It's so easy to do experiments now. You could measure almost anything, but you do single cell RNA-seq on a million different things, but most of those things are not worth doing. You have to think very carefully before you do your own research. What really could make a difference? What could answer some mystery that everybody would like to know? There's so many things we don't understand about biology. I write a cell biology textbook every few years. We just finished the 7th edition of our big book. And so I have a privilege of looking across all of biology, cell biology, and just so many unsolved problems that are very important to solve. So the good news for young people is that there are wonderful things for you to do in science where we need you to be creative and make contributions. The bad news is that some of the older scientists set rules that make younger scientists feel forced to do things that are obvious and are certain to work. You need to be able to take risks and try something new. And I've written a piece in Science magazine recently. 2018? Harold Varmus, Shirley Tillman, and I wrote a piece about how to support science. We very much admire something called the European Research Council. It funds young scientists to take risks, and it evaluates them with a broad group of expert scientists who try to make a judgment. Is this an important problem? Is this a person who has a good idea? Is this a person who has some ability to solve problems? In the United States, so many of the funding decisions are made by narrow groups of scientists who are experts in something, and they basically ask, is this going to work? is this something we know will work? And if it's not something they know will work, they often don't give it enough priority to get it funded. So my colleagues and I really wrote an article where we are urging the United States National Institutes of Health to make what we call a level playing field for young scientists. They have half the grants are for doing something that you've already been working on that you think will likely work, and those are the things that normally get funded. But the other half of grants are reserved for projects like the ones that the European Research Council funds with their so-called starter grants. They look for new ideas, for taking risks, for something that if it works will really make a big difference. And so we have a long ways to go. And now I don't know anything about Indian funding, except I know lately there's been less of it. But hopefully you guys will change that. I'm a big fan of the Indian Young Academy. You know the Young Academy? Do you guys know about the Young Academy? Darshini, do you know? So tell us what the Young Academy is. Can't hear you.
Okay. It funds young scientists who come up with creative ideas to do research in science.
So there's a whole movement of young academies around the world. There are now more than 40 countries with young academies. The Young Academy was first established by the Germans in about the year 2000. It was the first Young Academy. But basically, it was a great invention. It selects 35-year-old scientists and engineers. I think the Indian Academy has about 100 people in 135 to 40-year-old outstanding scientists and engineers and other people some who are science communicators and so on. And you're only in the Young Academy for 5 years, because otherwise the Young Academy would get to be old. So every year, Young Academy might take in 20 new people and 20 people go out. And there's a organization in Germany. The German government has been very good about supporting young scientists. And they're supporting something called the Global Young Academy, which has a wonderful website you could go to. And it talks about how to organize the Young Academy and what they do. And I'm sure the Indian Young Academy also has a website, but I understand that they've been very successful. It turns out that in most countries, including in Germany and in Indonesia, I was a science envoy from the United States for Obama to Indonesia about 10 years ago. And Indonesia has a Young Academy that started when I was involved with Indonesia. It's in those countries, it's often true that the politicians don't want to hear from the old scientists like me. But they much more rather hear from young scientists. And so like in Germany, the Bundestag, the parliament, wanted to meet with the young scientists and not with the older scientists. And I have a theory about that. People like me remind me of their politicians, of their professors who gave them a bad grade in chemistry or something. But younger scientists remind them of their grandchildren, and so they're not threatening in the same way. But anyway, for whatever reason, young academies have been very important. For one thing, if people like me don't really exist because I'm not on social media. So, you guys are living in the world of social media. I'm not even on it. So, the older academies generally don't have any existence at all in social media. But of course, the young academies are all over social media, and they interact with each other across the world. I believe that every country should have a young academy, and that to a large extent, the future of science is going to depend on having very active young academies. And some young academies, like the second Young Academy established was in the Netherlands, and I know a lot of people in the Netherlands at Young Academy. They have then tried to make even younger groups of scientists like you, empower them to have some influence over what happens in your country for science. So look up the Young Academy and pay attention to see, maybe you could get them to help organize younger students.
Yeah, definitely. So that is something everyone should look forward to, and we'll hope we can actually contribute something to this someday, maybe. And yeah, talking about experiments itself also. So do you have I mean, this question might interest not everyone, but would you say you have a favorite experiment or a favorite piece of work that, had moved you in your days? Like you find that it is very pivotal in the field of biology or any field for that essence.
Very important to do experiments.
Yeah, I'm asking you, what would be your favorite piece of work, or what would you label as the most beautiful experiment?
I'm not sure I understand the question, but I would assume that at your ICER you get in a lab very early. Is that right? Are you all in a lab, a research lab?
I mean,
Some of us are undergraduates. We have not yet started working in the lab. So some of them are PhD students.
I see. Well, I was at ICER maybe 10 years ago in Pune. I was there, and I had a really nice visit with the students, and I was very impressed. The people who graduated, all the students who graduated 10 years ago, what are they doing now? Are they scientists?
Yes,
What
some of them
happens to the?
some of them have become professors in their fields, and yes, most of them are in research.
Is there a big alumni group that you could connect to?
We are still building one.
So that would be very useful for you to connect to. I'm a big fan of Zoom. I mean, the pandemic has been bad in many ways, but the one good thing that came out of the pandemic is we could all now communicate easily from distances. And I'm involved with other alumni groups of other science organizations, and they're now really much more powerful than they could be before, because they could self-organize interest groups, and everybody meets once a month by Zoom. Those people who are interested in whatever, they're interested in plant photosynthesis or whatever. You could do a lot of things that you couldn't do before. We have a project that I'm involved in, trying to improve science education, and we organized through the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation 10 experts from around the world, and they meet like for 2 hours every 2 weeks to work on a project, and it really doesn't cost anybody anything. Nobody has to travel, and so I think many institutions have failed to recognize the new opportunities. For example, to connect all the students now at your ICER to interest groups, special interest groups of alumni, who could then help you think about your next steps in science. I'm not very useful because I don't understand Indian science, how it works exactly. I've been to India maybe 20 times, but I still don't understand all the politics. But all your graduates who are now in science could really help you. And so I hope you guys have taken the initiative to try to help them help you. And not just talk to old people in the United States. Anyway.
Yes. We need big work on that. We're still building one. And so you have done your graduate and postgraduate research at Harvard. So do you think the institution plays a crucial role in nurturing that scientific research-based mindset?
So, Harvard is overrated. There are many good places. What you want, if if you want to go to graduate school, there are many good programs, and Harvard happens to be so famous for other reasons. Is not because of their science, but there are many good places. I don't know, but I know there are many good places in Europe. And there are many very good graduate programs in the United States. And the one I know best, of course, is the one at my university, which is UCSF. So in a good graduate program in the United States, you get accepted in the graduate program. You don't know yet who your professor is going to be because you don't know enough. I know there's some graduate programs where you have to select a professor from India. That doesn't make any sense because you don't know whether it's a good lab, a bad lab. You don't know anything about the personality of the person. So all the good graduate, what I would call the good graduate programs in the United States, have first year where you take some courses, but you do a lab rotation. You rotate through 3 different labs. Every quarter you do a different lab. And you're not allowed to try to select your PhD advisor till after your 3rd rotation. So you have to have 3 experiences, and then in June or July of your first year, you get to say, I want to work for this professor, and the professor says, I'll take you or I won't take you. But anyway, you find a lab that you really understand because you understand what it's like to be a student there. Even if you haven't rotated there, you talk to the other students and see what does the professor pay attention to students? Does he, does the professor care about students? All those things. So I think you want to find a graduate program that allows you to rotate through different laboratories in your first year, and then make a decision, a very important decision, who you're going to work for as a professor, where you're going to be the apprentice in science. Make that with some real experience and knowledge, not just guessing. And I always advise students to choose a young professor who has a small lab, so that the young professor will pay attention to you, is somebody who really will take care of you and pay. You go into a very large lab, you're just lost. I don't believe in large laboratories anyway. I think laboratories shouldn't be bigger than about 10 or 12 people. And some of these large labs are just not very good training environments for students. I'm very biased.
No, I think yes, that's very true. And having taken up many policy positions, what do you think are the changes that can be made to refine the present education system? What are your thoughts on the present methods of teaching, learning, and evaluation?
So this is what I've been working on lately, is science
Yes,
education.
yes.
So we know a lot from scientifically based education research about what makes students learn and what's good teaching and what's not good teaching. And we know that, a professor standing up in front of a class with PowerPoint slides and talking the whole time is not the best way to learn for students, most students. Now, the professors are old, so they probably learned that way. So they were selected to be people who could learn well from PowerPoint slides or from just lecturing. But we know that active learning is far more successful in creating people who really understand science. More than that, we know from research that there are different kinds of active learning. We know that the most effective forms of active learning involve you interacting with at least one other student to try to make sense out of something. It's actually amazing. It's actually amazing that you learn more for trying to understand another person's point of view, and then you remember it. If you just memorize some fact from a PowerPoint slide, take an exam, the next year you may not know anything about it. It's not education if you don't remember it. So anyway, I mean, the bottom line is we know a lot from really outstanding research in the last 30 years about how students learn. Most of it's been done in psychology departments. And there have been big experiments done in college classes, investigating with, controls, what's the best way to reach students and get them to understand and be excited about science. But most professors are not paying attention to that. So one of the things I try to do is get professors to pay attention to that. There's the National Academy of Sciences in the United States has published something like 10,000 reports on their website. And one of those reports is called, you could Google it, it's called Reaching Students, What Research Says About Teaching Undergraduates in Science and Engineering. So you Google Reaching Students National Academy, and you'll find this, and it's a free PDF, and it's designed for college faculty, for your professors. But I'm sure your professors, because you're a very special university, they probably know all this stuff, but most professors don't have time. In the United States, so many faculty, the pressure's all on their research, not on their teaching, so they don't spend enough time thinking about their teaching. And so it's just too easy to use the same PowerPoint slides every year and not get your students excited about science.
Yes. Yeah, we have an audience question. I believe that the book that you've written, and many of us are still starstruck and finding this hard to believe, but we have just completed our mid-semester exams and some of the courses even had the textbook authored by you. So how did the entire process of writing molecular biology of the cell begin and unfold? How long did it take, and what were the challenges that you faced? I believe it also involved a lot of discussion and deliberation and all that. So yeah.
Yeah, you want to know about, I see all these questions about the textbook. So I've been writing a
Yes.
textbook for 43 years. And the good news is it's all free because it's stolen and everybody could get an Indian as a PDF, right? So my co-author, Keith Roberts, is to write I'm in London. So he's the guy who does all the drawings. Keith, why don't you put your face? There are 90 students from India here. And this is the famous Keith Roberts. Who
Hi, wow, what a lot of people.
Anyway, he did all those drawings in our textbook. And in the old days, of course, the people in India had to buy the textbook and it was too expensive. So maybe it was our second edition. We had a special company in India print the textbook in black and white on inexpensive paper. And it was then available in India, but they never did it again because some people in India sold the textbooks back to Europe and the United States. They didn't stay in India. So the publisher wouldn't do it again. But in later years, of course, we had the internet and we have all the people putting up our textbook as a free PDF. It's not legal. And the publishing company doesn't like it because they don't sell as many books. But when I'm in India, I ask people how many people have my textbook. Now everybody has to raise their hand. So the authors are at least happy that we are able to have everybody have access to our textbook. So the hardest part about writing a textbook is what you leave out because there's so much known. And every year we have to take out 10% or 20% of our textbook and add the new things. So that's the real hard part of the textbook. And of course, you could find out anything on the internet, but it's just impossible to make sense of it. It's too much. So Prachiti has a hand raised, I see. Prachiti, are you there?
Yes, sir. Yeah. It is really great having you for the talk. Like having it fit like a real talk with an author. It's like it feels really great. So my question is like very basic. As in, you must have faced it for the some time that you have a multiple ideas to work on your mind. But how do you specifically give a priority, like to what to work on the first and what to next? Because this field is like a very competitive, right? So someone might just come and like already work on it, and you might just like lost your time or chance. So how do you prioritize?
Well, this is the whole this is life. You have to provide there's so many distractions in your life, and you can't do everything that's interesting. So I'm not that good at that because I get involved in too many things, and I'm always late. And so everything I'm supposed to do is delayed. Say, but you know, you have to think very carefully about what you do, and really, life is like making a judgment about what kind of science to do. You have to think very carefully about it. One advice I give to young people is that when you're thinking, every week, I think if you can make yourself do this, so every Monday morning, say, spend 1 hour writing down what you're thinking about that's important. And I find that when I write, it helps my thinking. Just thinking there is pretty undisciplined, but if I make myself sit down for an hour and write what do I have to do, what you know, what's most important, it really helps me. It was also true in my science. Every time I did an experiment, I made it a habit to write, sit down and write, what did I learn from that experiment in my notebook? And because we know from actually science education research, when you have to do something active like that, you actually learn a lot. And when you just think about it briefly, it doesn't really make the same impact on you. So at any rate, you have to learn by making, as I said, you have to learn by making mistakes. I'm sure you'll make lots of mistakes, but the main thing is every time you make a mistake, think carefully about it, write down what you learned, why was it a mistake, what did I learn, why I won't do that, what should I learn, I will make my next step more effective, so I'll be wiser. I like to say that people my age are useful as mentors because we made so many mistakes. So we've learned from our mistakes. You know, education, you have to experience, active learning is, you have to have a meaningful active learning in order to really get an education. And that's the same thing that happens all throughout your life. By making mistakes, you really learn because so I've gotten to the stage where when something goes wrong and I have a problem to solve, obviously I don't like having a problem, but I take it as an important challenge. It's almost like, well, I have this problem now in science. I have a problem in life. I got to figure out how to solve it. You use your scientific skills in your daily life to try to make some kind of plan. And again, I'm repeating myself, but I try to write down, just a half a page. What am I thinking? And as you write, we know from education research, as you write, you learn. So I have all these questions.
Yeah, there are quite a few. There were quite. I think you answered
Right.
quite a few questions.
So the last question from Adita says, is basically every edition we see the progress, but we also see the holes. Yes, there are many progress. This edition, we learned how chromosomes are folded by SMC protein. These active loop extrusion to fold chromosomes, that's completely new in this edition. There are many other things that are completely new, but there always are many more unanswered questions than we have answers to. One of the things I write about every edition is heterochromatin, how you have epigenetic turning off of genes and then turning them on in human cells or eukaryotes. We know almost nothing about the molecular basis of heterochromatin, and that's remained true every edition. hardly anybody's working on it because it's a hard problem. Somebody has to purify all those proteins and set up an in vitro system and try to form heterochromatin. It's going to be one of you guys. And we need to have people, older people, fund young scientists to try those hard projects. So there are many, the question is, what are many places that there are understandings missing. Heterochromatin is only one of many, where we don't see enough effort being put. And on the other hand, we see way too many people doing the same experiments in cancer research, for example. All these popular things to measure something in a tumor cell, and it's boring. It's not going to make much progress. So, it's all about strategy and thinking. Try to think like, you want to think like Rembrandt. Just pretend you're a Rembrandt trying to paint a picture. Think big and then keep on writing down what you're thinking and try to come up with a nice idea that your professor never thought of. That's when you become a scientist. You realize that you could do something by yourself. So my bottom line is we badly need you guys to solve all these problems. And maybe we'll see some of you at UCSF. That would be great. But I most of all, I think that science is such a wonderful endeavor, and it's such a important way of thinking for everybody. As we face this pandemic, we see the tragedy of people who will not get vaccinated, people who won't wear masks, people who want to take ivermectin, a horse medicine, instead of getting vaccinated because they read on the internet that ivermectin is better than vaccination, and they just believe it. And a major problem of science education is that we have to do a much better job so that people don't dismiss what scientists know about ivermectin. We know ivermectin doesn't work from lots of experiments, trials. We know that vaccines work, but people don't understand that science actually knows things. It doesn't just guess. And I think so many people in life think that science is just what scientists believe. Scientists are like a bunch of groupies. We think in certain ways, and they could either accept it or reject it. And so in every country, we need science spread through the population much more effectively, so people think like scientists.
Yeah, so you have been a part of, you've played an active part in science communication. And there is one question in the chat box by Anumariam that says that, what is your opinion on the current level of accessibility to scientific research for a layman, particularly in terms of paywalls for scientific publications?
Yeah, well, yeah. So, the paywalls are coming down. I mean, how everything's going to be open access soon. I mean, everything important. So we're making progress. When I first went to India, it was like 1994 or something like that. I was at Nehru University meeting with students, and I learned that they could not get access to PNAS, the publication of the National Academy of Sciences. I was amazed. So right at that time, internet was just starting. And we made, 1995, I think it was, we made PNAS free immediately to all of the developing world. 146 countries, it was free. The only people who had to pay, it was, and PNAS is open access after 6 months to everywhere. But the people in America, the people in Japan, the people in Europe had to pay for the first 6 months of PNAS because we needed some money to run the journal. But we were not making money, we were just covering our expenses. So that was an early experience based on India that made me realize that this is a huge problem. So meanwhile, in the interim, open access has really taken off. And I think almost everything is going to be available very soon. And there's all kinds of problems with fake journals. You know about all these things. Do you study fake journals, and are you prepared to avoid them? Anyway, India is a great home for fake journals. So everybody's trying to take your money, or everybody's trying to trick you in life. So scientific thinking is very important. I think we're about run out of time.
Yes, yes. And so I'll just come to one final question. It's a very light one. So if you hadn't.
So if you email me some questions, I could answer them by email. Okay.
Sure. So
select some questions I didn't answer, and I'll do it by email. And I hope to see you in Pune someday after the pandemic.
Yes.
Hopefully soon, yeah.
Even we look forward to having you at our institute. So one final question. If you hadn't become a scientist, what would you have chosen as your career?
Oh, maybe I could have been I would have liked to have been a high school teacher, but I teaching science probably.
Yeah, we'd love to be your students too.
Yeah, I want all my I have 7 grandchildren. I want them all to be teachers, because I think it's the most important thing for the future of society. Have good teachers, and we don't value teachers enough. We don't pay teachers enough. But it's the most important profession for the future, to have good teachers. So, anyway, so why don't you email me some more questions? Select the ones that you think are most important, and I'll try to answer them by email. Okay?
Yes.
Okay. Wonderful meeting with you. My friend just arrived to meet me in London. I haven't seen him in 2 years. We're going to work on our textbook.
Yes. With that, we come to the end of this insightful session. Thank you, Dr. Albers, for taking out the time to have this session with us. It was a delight interacting with you. And thank you, audience, for being such a wonderful audience and asking all these questions. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, sir.